Hi, this is Father Bill W. I'm an Episcopal priest in long-term recovery here in Austin, Texas, and welcome back to the podcast. I've had the gift of sobriety since December of 1972, and for the last 26 years or so, I've been really interested in the early practices that they were doing in AA and in the Oxford group, especially interested in something they call two-way prayer. And I'd invite you to visit our website by that same name, twowayprayer.org, and follow me on Facebook if you get a chance under the title Father Bill W. One other note, if you're listening on iTunes and if this series has been helpful to you, I'd encourage you to please rate us and write a little short review. It'll help spread the word, especially if you like us. If you don't like us, you can disregard that instruction. This is our final episode in the series we're doing on the 12 steps. I hope it's given you some insights into how it was that the pioneers approached these steps back at a time when there actually were no steps, but there was a process that they were using. So now we are up to step 12, and to kind of help set this in context, I want to go back and remind us of just how it was we started this series. And we really began the journey with Roland Hazard. And I think it's appropriate to kind of finish up with Roland as well. Roland, excuse me, as you may recall, he was a hopeless alcoholic. He had been treated by Carl Jung in Switzerland, and he failed after his initial treatment. He went back to see the psychiatrist, and it was Jung who then sent Roland on his spiritual search. Uh, he had been pronounced hopeless. And that was really the key word. It's the word that I think it doesn't appear in step one, but it is really the message of step one. And because he had been declared hopeless, uh, he was desperate for finding some way uh, to do what he hadn't been able to do himself. Okay, so Roland asks Jung when he's pronounced hopeless, "Are there no exceptions?" And this is the quote from the big book that kind of picks up with that story. So this is Jung speaking to Roland. And Jung says, exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Some experience happens at a very, very deep level, is what Jung is saying, that changes them. It changes their psyche. Uh, so Roland goes off and he finds this experience through the Oxford group, and then the chain of events that lead to his helping Ebby, and Ebby's helping Bill, and Bill's helping Bob, and Bob and Bill helping all of us. That's the chain of event. But it goes back to this spiritual journey on which Roland is sent. So, if there weren't steps, then what was the process the pioneers went through to affect a change of this nature? Well, this is where I think if we study the history, it's going to give us some real keen insights into what this process was, because I worry that we're losing it. Um, And we'll get into that in a bit. So anyway, step 12. What does it say? Well, originally it said this: having had a spiritual experience. As the result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And you notice there, I used the word spiritual experience instead of spiritual awakening. And it's one of the few changes that's ever been made to the Big Book. But it was felt that the word experience maybe was too threatening for alcoholics, so they toned it down a bit. And doing some research, Bill Wilson, who initially okayed that change to the step, he later wanted to reverse himself and change it back. I remember reading Ed Dowling, the priest who was spiritual mentor to Bill, when he heard that they had changed the words from an experience to an awakening, that he wept at that. So something really profound was going on in that shift. And, I've always been taught, it's wonderful because it has opened the door to many people so that they don't think they have to have a white light experience like Bill had. But perhaps it also has toned it down a bit. Anyway, I thought it might be fun to listen to Bill Wilson himself as he shares his own experience with this controversy between spiritual experience and spiritual awakening. So here's Bill, and let's listen to him now.
Own experience, though, in changing the steps is rather amusing. It just shows you how things can get frozen. Somebody just showed me a copy of the first printing of the A book, the big red thick one that we made so thick with thick paper so the drunks would get their money's worth. And in that, this is it. In here, you will find in the 12th step that this, having had a spiritual experience, we use the word experience to denote the spiritual transformation, and no doubt took that notion from William James, whose great book, Varieties of Religious Experience, laid a foundation for this movement. And the foundation was upon hopelessness, because the James cases who had the marked transforming experiences were people who at depth admitted that they had something that they alone couldn't get over, under, or around. So this transforming experience was called by James experience, and his book was called Varieties of Religious Experience, and so are his examples of it, and we have duplicated them in all of their myriad forms. Now then, I always liked this word, experience, but there was a hell of a movement. I believe it emanated down in Greenwich Village in about 1937 or 8, when the book was under contemplation, or rather just after the book was published, be more like 40. And this was a movement to get rid of this conversion business and this experience business. And after a hell of a lot of tub thumping, the people who wished to change got it, and I dutifully inscribed in the second printing that hereafter this was not to be an experience, it was to be a tepid form of experience called an awakening. Well, I don't know whether anybody got well in Greenwich Village who would have died otherwise. No, I really don't. And so sometime afterward, when AA had got a little less absolutist and the more intellectuals had got down to their right size, I said, well, I'm going to try to put back that word experience. I'll be damned if I don't like it. And I think some of the old mossbacks like me would like it too. So I tried to put it back, and I was absolutely shouted down and assaulted for heresy by God, and I was threatened with excommunication to change one word of the Holy Writ, which is now spiritual awakening.
So it's always nice to hear from an AA heretic, especially if that heretic is the co-founder of the program. So anyway, exactly what is a spiritual experience or an awakening? Call it what we will. That's what I want to really kind of dive into in this episode. And I want to quote from a book by a man by the name of H.A. Walter, and he was an Oxford group member and one of the pioneers. His book was titled Soul Surgery. And I love some of the titles that they gave to Oxford group books. You know, I Was a Pagan, Soul Surgery, Life Changers. They were out to really kind of cut to the chase in this spirituality business, not to make it holy, holy, holy stuff, but to really get down to the nitty gritty of where people lived and how spirituality can really affect them and their lives. In this book, it's the study of the 5 C's that Frank Bookman used to describe his program. And we explained these in a previous episode, but real quickly, just to go through them, because they really have a great deal to do with this conversion experience. So here's the process. Here's what the 5 C's were about. They were confidence, confession, conviction, conversion, and then conservation. And so very, very quickly, confidence, to gain the confidence of a new man or woman when they come in, to show how important they are, to spend time with them, to confess in the second one, your sins, theirs, and then get them to confess their sins. What is it that's separating us from God? What is it that's going on inside? They had honest conversations with one another. That brought about the third C, which was conviction, a deep awareness of their separation from God, of how they're not living life properly and want to really make a change. Um, and then the fourth is the conversion that we're going to really be diving into here, that conversion process. And then the fifth is conservation, how to keep it going. Because this isn't just a one-time deal that happens and then you're fixed. It's an ongoing, lifelong journey. So we want to really look at conversion and what does that mean? Because I think that's another word for the psychic change that is used by Jung, the conversion experience, psychic change, personality change, goes by many, many names. But my hope is that we're going to have a deeper understanding of what's going on there. So one of the quotes that Walters uses in his book to explain the conversion process comes from William James. And William James was really popular. He was the father of American psychology. It's one of his titles. But his writings were really popular with the members of the Oxford group. So they promoted James because he took religion and spirituality and psychology seriously and blended them together in a ways that we're still really trying to deal with. So he wrote this book, The Varieties of Religious Experience, and Wilson was given a copy of it, probably by Ebby, just soon after he had had his own white light experience there in Towns Hospital. And here's the definition that James uses for conversion, the conversion experience. I'm going to read it twice. First time I read it, I just want you to kind of listen and just sort of catch the essence of the whole thing. And then the second time, we're going to go through it and break it down into some of its component parts. So here's conversion experience from William James. To be converted, to be regenerated, to receive grace, to experience religion, to gain an assurance, are so many phrases which denote the process, gradual or sudden, by which a self, hitherto divided and consciously wrong, inferior, and unhappy, becomes unified and consciously right, superior, and happy, in consequence of its firmer hold upon religious realities. And that's a mouthful, but James James is pretty good at loading an awful lot of material into a sentence. So let's take a look at that thing, because I think it's really important, and it kind of goes back to what Jung said in the Big Book, where they were talking about the vital spiritual experience. It's very similar to that. So, to be converted, to have this psychic change is what that means. And then there's some other language that is used similar to that. To be regenerated. In the Salvation Army programs, that's the word that they use, regeneration. To receive grace, to experience religion, to gain an assurance. All of these are so many different phrases which tell about what? Well, they tell about a process. And that process can be gradual or it can be sudden. So there's the sudden variety of religious experience, or there is the gradual, or as he later calls it, the educational variety. So it can happen in two ways. It can be quick or it can be slow, but happen it must. So ways by which a self, uh, my awareness of who I am, my conscious awareness, my ego, my how I operate, who I am. Uh, so by which a self, and each one of us is a self, hitherto, which means what used to be, divided and consciously wrong, inferior, and unhappy. Well, if you're an alcoholic, you were those things. I certainly was divided. A divided will, a divided mind. I want to drink. I don't want to drink. I mean, it's those opposites clashing so violently, and feeling consciously wrong, feeling inferior, and being unhappy. Well, that describes probably every one of us when we walk into the rooms. So that self that we knew quite well undergoes a change, and it becomes what? Unified instead of divided, and consciously right, an awareness that it is now doing the next right thing. Superior and happy. It's better than the way it was. And why? And that's the final phrase. In consequence, as a result of its firmer hold upon religious realities. Now, don't let that religious realities scare you too much. We're gonna break that down a little bit further. Um, Spirituality, we're much more comfortable using the word spirituality than we are with the word religion. But spirituality is actually a later day invention. Um, Religious realities were what they talked about. And we've just gotten really uncomfortable with organized religion. And even as a priest, you can count me among those who is uncomfortable with so many of the things that we have done in the name of religion that is not spiritual, is not religious in its real proper sense. Anyway, so the center, the psyche, the self, it gets rearranged. The configuration in which it was is no longer the way that it now is. That's the change. And it can be slow and gradual, or it can be instantaneous. And I've seen both kinds in my years in the program. But the folks who make it are the ones who experience that change. They simply are not the same people that they once were. And as a result of that, they are able to do things. We are able to do things that we were unable to do. Okay. So James goes on. I want to break this centerpiece down a little bit more. He goes on to say, it makes a great difference to a man whether one set of ideas or another be the center of his energy. To say that man is converted, psychic change, means that religious ideas previously peripheral in his consciousness, they're on the sideline of my consciousness. They now take a central place, and that religious aims form a habitual center of his energy. Well, what the heck are we talking about there? We're talking about that shift in consciousness where a change happens at a really deep level of the self, that I now come from that place, and that religious ideas, which were once kind of on the sideline of my mind, now they take on a new reality, maybe a reality for the first time. And I'm doing things coming from this place. And it's a very, very different place. What is this place? I think this is the conscious contact that's spoken about in step 11. Am I in touch with that power? Am I connected to that power? Am I joined with God? And this is why I believe the prayer and meditation was viewed by people in early AA and certainly in the Oxford group as more important than going to meetings. Meetings, they said, were helpful, but this meeting of God in your morning quiet time and meditation and two-way prayer was the essential piece to effect the transformation. All right, I hope you caught that. Hey, so another quote here from a Harvard professor, a few pages on in this soul surgery book, says this: if you want to find a way of living which surmounts doubt and centralizes your powers, it must be some such way as all the loyal in conversion have trodden since first loyalty was known among men. And what he's saying there is there have been traditions that people have always followed. And the real purpose of religion is to set out a pathway that you can follow that should bring about this transformation. If you'll follow the religious tradition, and you're not taught, this is the key point, not talking about doctrines and dogmas and all of the stuff that we have really screwed up religion with, but it's the mystical path. It's the breakthrough to a new level of consciousness that every one of the great religions has always stood for, has always presented a path. Very few have really kind of traveled that path. We get stuck and sidelined on some of the unimportant things that keep us from the effect of a real religious conversion. Um, so, the big book says, be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer. And that's the piece that we've got to really, really start paying attention to. Unfortunately, religion has become much more about belief than it has been about experience. And I think AA has changed that, and that's a very good thing. Um, so I want to go back to Carl Jung now, since he was really instrumental in getting Roland started in all of this. Um, and he was once asked um, if he believed in God. And his answer is enlightening. He basically said he didn't believe, not in the sense of doctrines and dogmas and all of that stuff, but through experience. He knew it at a far, far deeper level. So let's bring Dr. Jung into this and listen to him now as he talks about this in his own words.
And did you believe in God?
Oh, yes.
Do you now believe in God?
Now? Difficult to answer. I know. I don't need to believe. I know.
So what Jung is saying there is that he knows God because of his experience of God. And that, I think, is what the 12-step process is intended to bring about. Um, so there's a Jungian therapist who was really, really helpful to me in my own journey. Never met him, but read all of his books. His name is Robert Johnson. He had studied under Carl Jung, and he wrote a book called Transformation. I would recommend it highly. And and in it, I saw the words that he used that were so similar to what the Oxford Group people were talking about and what the Big Book is talking about. And again, if you can hear something in different language, we get so used to the language of the Big Book, it becomes like the language of Scripture. It just rolls over us, and we miss the real message of what it's trying to convey. So here in these passages, he's writing about the psychic change, and he calls it moving from the three-dimensional level of consciousness into the fourth, which is the experience of the spiritual. And that's really the same language that is used in the Big Book, where we talk about a fourth level of existence. It's that spiritual domain that is so elusive, but we get an experience of it, an insight into it, a participation in it. And so, anyway, here is Johnson writing, and I hope you enjoy this. He says, "For most people, the transformation from from three-dimensional consciousness to four-dimensional consciousness is exceedingly painful. It hurts like hell to move from the third level to the fourth. Medieval Christianity called it the dark night of the soul. Dante called it the journey through hell. It was 40 days and 40 nights in the desert for Jesus. It was a journey in the belly of the fish for many a hero. It is hitting bottom for those of us in 12-step recovery." He goes on, "For a modern man, it is midlife crisis, or worse, a nervous breakdown, or still worse, physical suicide." And here's where the sentence jumped out at me. The process can be summed up in one sentence. It is the relocating of the center of the personality from the ego to a center greater than one's self. Repeat, it is the relocating of the center of the personality from the ego to a center greater than one's self. This superpersonal center has been variously called the self with a capital S. That's the way the Jungians talk about it. Called the self, the Christ nature, the Buddha nature, superconsciousness, cosmic consciousness, satori, and samadhi. This relocation appears to be death when viewed from the perspective of the ego. You know, I've become the big 12 and 12. I'm going to become the hole in the donut. Zen masters observe that satori can be viewed by the ego as nothing but total disaster, and death it is. The ego loses its supremacy and goes through a short time of violent suffering. I remember when I was working with a therapist many, many years ago, just coming into the program. This guy was really tough. He introduces himself and he says, "Hello, Bill. My name is Ted, and I'm going to kill you. Welcome to the group." But I knew exactly what he meant. And it's this: that his job as my therapist was to kill the self that was killing me. And if you really want to understand what recovery is about, it is about death and resurrection. It is about dying to that old self so that a new self can come into existence. Johnson continues, when someone threatens suicide at this time, I caution him that he must be very careful to do it without harming his body. See, I read sometimes, just last week in the newspaper, suicides, and oftentimes a member of 12-step programs. We want to kill that thing in us that is killing us, and we got to do it. But we got to do it without harming ourselves, and that is the spiritual journey. This relocation of the center of the personality is a form of suicide, Johnson says, and it's best done by the ego. Whoa! In other words, we have to cooperate with it. A Zen master in Los Angeles once said to his client, "Why don't you die now and enjoy the rest of your life?" All right. I want to give you the other side because he continues. Give you some hope here for the hopeless. When the dark night begins to lift, one morning there is an unaccountable touch of joy in the air. This is the first contact with the four-dimensional consciousness, and one can begin to live from that source of energy. Something of the subtle inner world becomes your center of gravity. Poetry, music, a new perceptiveness when you are jogging. Things change. Sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they change. And they're changing because my center is changing. He goes on to caution, less worthy channels for this new energy are fanaticism. I think there's a place for big book thumping, but if after a period of time that's all we've got is big book thumpers, we've missed the transformation. Dictatorial religious beliefs, and this is a sad commentary on how religion has really subverted the spiritual journey and kind of kept people on pablum. This is some dangerous stuff, and we need it, and we don't have access to it. And so less worthy channels for this new energy are fanaticism, dictatorial religious beliefs, and ego inflations of all kinds. If the new energy flows into such channels, you are quickly sent back for further boiling in the oil of transformation. I just love that line. Uh, you're sent back. In other words, if you get it, you're done. You've got it. You hold on to it. But if you don't get it, like most of us don't get it, we have to undergo further suffering. So the 12-step journey is a pathway which does involve and should involve some suffering if we're going to experience transformation. And that's why I believe the serious work of steps 10, 11, and 12 is so vital, that we watch ourselves, and we watch ourselves slipping back. Okay, and then we pray, and as we pray in step 11, we shift our center, slowly or quickly, but it shifts. And I'm now the barriers between me and God are removed, and I'm hearing His voice and I'm receiving His direction. And then in 12, I act on that because I've had a change in consciousness. All right. So one more quote, and then we'll wrap this up. And it's an important one. It's also from Walter's book. He says, the basis of conversion is the awakening of a new self, and the vital elements in this new birth is the dawning of a new affection, which henceforth dominates the heart. Conversion is, in fact, a falling in love, a saying yes to the divine lover. It is this passion for the capital unseen and the capital eternal, which above all else can change the heart and strengthen the will and illuminate the mind. Conversion is the birth of love. The four absolutes were key to the early Oxford Group, early AA program. And the absolutes are all about leading to love. Honesty, leading to love. Purity, leading to love. Unselfishness, leading to the fourth absolute, which is love. And what is love? Love is God. God is love. When I was in treatment for the last time, I was told a whole number of things. So you got to remember this. Well, I forgot most of them. But one thing I never forgot was when they said to me, Bill, if you don't find something that feels better than alcohol and drugs, you're going to go back to them. And I knew when I heard that I was being told the truth. And the thing they were talking about, I believe, was in fact love. And what the steps are there to do are meant to bring us into an experience of that love, which is God. So having an experience of that, I believe, which is what the message of step 12 is. Having had that experience, then the rest of that step falls quickly into place. We'll practice these principles in all our affairs. Why? Because we don't want to deprive ourselves of the connection. We're going to listen for God's voice. We're going to have a direct experience of His unconditional love. If we do that, then carrying the message to those out there who are literally dying to hear it will become our personal mission statement. So to me, that's the essence of step 12, as Wilson tried to convey it in some beautiful, beautiful words. And it's important that he didn't exactly get that from Sam Shoemaker and the Oxford Group. He said he got that more directly from William James. So I think if we study what James was trying to convey in his discussion of what that conversion experience is all about, I think we'll come a heck of a lot closer to understanding what the steps are designed to lead us to. So, hope this wasn't too heady. I know I got off on a bunch of maybe extraneous, but maybe not. I think they really go to the essence of what the transformation process is all about. So anyway, hope this has been of some help to you on your own spiritual journey. If it has, share this with a friend and help us spread the word. I appreciate your listening. God bless, and keep coming back.